A big warm welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, watch a Doctor Who episode selected by a friend of mine and drop in facts, observations, memories, recollections, and try to guess what my guest's favourite thing about the instalment might be.
Hello, Toby, and hello, Happy Times and Places listeners. My name is Joe Ford, and Toby and I first came into contact when he recorded one of my podcast episodes about a year ago for Frontiers, the podcast called Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, which is also a commentary podcast. And he enjoyed it so much, or so he tells me, that he came back and recorded another one for Army of Ghost and Doomsday, which he seems to have forgotten about, but it was actually one of my most listened to episodes. So, Toby, go back to listen to that one because it's really good. Yeah, I love Happy Times and Places, and so I wanted to say thank you for providing me with hours of entertainment and for allowing me this opportunity. Right, so the story I have chosen today is the Jodie Whittaker story. I've chosen this because I feel that the 13th Doctor is, or I was about to say underrepresented, but I think it's unrepresented on Happy Times and Places. So I have chosen the Series 12 opener, Spyfall. And I have chosen that because I think that Chris Chibnall has set off this new season on exactly the right foot. It's a globe-trotting, balls to the wall Bond parody. Huge budget, like enormous production value, great twists and turns, like action set pieces. It's pure entertainment, and I think it's something that was neglected a little bit in series 11. So I think he does a lot of things in Spyfall, which kind of ties into the things that I've chosen to rectify that in series 12. I just think this is full of pizzazz and spunk, and it's just a delight to watch. And I think the second episode doesn't disappoint either. So yeah, Spyfall is what we are going to be talking about today.
Right, I'm just going to go for this because who needs context? It's an hour-long episode anyway, pretty much. So I'm going to just dive in because I've sort of been putting this off and finding different things to do, and I'm getting behind, and I get scared of episodes I'm not too familiar with, but I've got to do them. So it's a sunny day. I should be out in the garden or doing something lovely, getting some vitamins D and E, which most Doctor Who fans are probably deprived themselves of, rather than. I was berating one of my children yesterday, talking to them on the Zoom, and I think that they're all dressed in black and haven't left the bedroom, and it's exactly what I used to do when I was that age. So I'm pleased that now that I'm older, I actually, I enjoy the benefits and feel the benefits of nice weather. But I'm gonna channel my inner Doctor Who fan by sitting in a darkened booth with no windows, watching part 2 of Spyfall, but in the company of the delightful Joe Ford, who is a beautiful, beautiful man and an excellent podcaster, whose Hamster with a Blunt Penknife in its various iterations is really good fun. If you want a Doctor Who podcast that is, it's joyous and very funny, and probably filthier than I would ever venture to be in any of my broadcasting about Doctor Who, and indeed at the dinner table, or indeed anywhere. But anyway, the BBC iPlayer holding image for this. Oh no, I think it's just it's because I've got it paused at the beginning. It's the American spy running down an alleyway, but it's the silhouetting and the lighting of it just goes to show how beautifully shot some of this modern Doctor Who is. But anyway, I am going to watch Spyfall Part 2 in the company of Joe Ford in 3, 2, 1. Previously on Doctor Who. I'm not sure I like the Doctor saying previously on Doctor Who. I know why it is done, and it's good having the stars. But to me, it points to the artifice, because even though, I love things like Patrick Troughton, that in that lost Web of Fear trailer or whatever, but that's an interesting curio from the past in terms of the way that one. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I think I prefer the gravelly voiced, unknown man previously on Doctor Who. No, he wouldn't do it in American though, would he? Previously on Doctor, I'll do it. No, I'm not angling for a job, I promise. That's not. I just, yeah, I'm not sure the main actor should do it. It sort of cheapens them a little bit, do you know what I mean? Even though they're doing it, I'm sure, for no extra money to be really helpful. I don't think it should be the actors, because we're about to see them try and convince us that they're the characters. It doesn't matter. But and anyway, if it was an American man, he'd be previously on Doctor Who. Because I've decided all Americans call Doctor Who, like they call Robin Hood. The all-new adventures of Doctor Who. The brand new adventures of Robin Hood. Do. I heard somebody describing this title sequence in not especially glowing terms. It does remind me, the shape of it reminds me, and I don't know if it's because it's the first female Doctor Who, of a sort of X-ray of the female sort of hip region, where the magic happens in that opening. Now I don't know but the bone shape, do you know what I mean? The hips and all the other bits, the bits and bobs, but the bones. I'm not being filthy. I'm talking about an X-ray of the area between the top of the legs and the belly button, I suppose. But it's that sort of bone shape. Anyway, but I wonder if that's just Dr. Freud going, "You're watching Lady Doctor Who. Look, here's a lady shape." Lady shapes that was a pitch, wasn't it, by Alan Partridge of the things he was pitching to the BBC, the lady shapes, the different shapes of ladies over the years. I do like Alan Partridge. I have a feeling that I have some Partridge DNA within me, which is not a compliment. The lighting in here is very nice. The contrast between this strange world of green light and trees and the real world. And I always like Doctor Who when it does sort of urban thriller, so a thing like a sort of crashing plane and malfeasance that goes to the very top, or something that's inveigled government or whatever is always very much my kind of Doctor Who, because I think I loved it when the X-Files did that, although they ultimately didn't they didn't have huge payoffs to their big conspiracy stuff. And I like Line of Duty, I like anything that has I loved Spooks, anything that has a sort of hint of conspiracy about it, even though in real life conspiracy theorists irritate me so much they make my teeth itch. And there's a lot of half-wittery and sour disposition amongst the world of conspiracy theorists, some of whom friends of mine have gone that way, and they think Joe Biden is a series of actors, and that the New World Order is leaving clues that only clever people like my friend can see, while the rest of us are sheep. And it's a way that seems to me angry and disappointed people try and give meaning to the world, and some try to centre themselves within it. But let's not get into that. But of course, I then do like drama that suggests that those people might be correct. so in a way, it creates them. Yeah, you see, I don't find this very funny, but there we go. I know what it's aiming for, but I just don't find it funny. And humour is taste, isn't it? But what I do like is that there's an attempt at the companions, with the help of the Doctor, coming up with an inventive way to get out of the problem. That's a really Doctor Who-y thing to do, and it's a well staged sequence in that respect. and it's certainly not in one bound they're free. You know, there's they have to work really hard in order not to die. But I don't think the comedy's very well judged or very well played in it, if I'm honest. But sorry, everybody. Sorry, Joe. So here we are. Yeah, so here we are in a sort of dream world of very tall trees or mummified spiders' legs or whatever it is. And again, and so here we have now. I have to confess, I didn't know who Ada Lovelace was. So here's Doctor Who doing what Doctor Who should do, which is introducing us to historical characters. And of course, how appropriate that, I mean, in this we have Ada Lovelace, and well, we'll get to her when we meet her later on, but we have two important female historical characters, and you know, that's obviously not an accidental decision. And now, male Doctor Who's have met male historical characters in the past, but this seems somehow to have more import to it, and I'm not complaining about that. It feels to me that this, you know, this new Doctor, this first, as far as we know at this point, female Doctor, having some sort of kinship with these two historical figures that she meets in this, I think is a nice use of the female Doctor, and as I say, I didn't really know anything about Ada Lovelace, so I'm quite pleased about that. I still like the white silhouettes, but I find a lot of talking in weird realms or dreamscapes, or separate dimensions. They leave me a bit cold because people are just sort of standing around chatting. I do find a lot of standing around chatting in this era, and standing around chatting, and chat can be good. I love a bit of chat when it's good chat. You know, three angry people in a boardroom chatting at high volume, calling each other bastards, and I love it. If it's in the 1970s and they're all swigging whiskey from a decanter and smoking and getting cross with each other, love all of that. So maybe that's just my conditioning. That's what drama is, because I grew up in a TV landscape dominated by middle-aged men shouting at each other. Maybe that's I've got sort of Stockholm syndrome. You need to manacle me to a radiator and have lots of slightly sweaty middle-aged actors talking about business. No, we could change that to a ministry as well. I mean, I used to get very excited watching Doomwatch when people would shout at each other. I watched some of it again recently, and it really hasn't aged well, and particularly the masculinity in me, which weirdly because Doctor Who, doesn't have, that sort of grown up masculinity in it, but it's written for kids, whereas Doomwatch was written for grown ups. Of course, and I know that's all. Things have aged differently and dated differently. But when I was at university and I saw people yelling at each other whilst dressed in 70s clothes, it all felt pretty cool watching Doomwatch when I was when I was 18, 19, when I'd been used to the sort of slightly, pitched slightly younger Doctor Who boardroom tone, But I watched some Doomwatch recently, and it was... you could smell the high karate and you could feel the nylon, but you could also, there was an acrid stink of misogyny, and that's not a word I throw about too often. And I tend to think we need to be a bit kinder to the past, or at least more understanding, or at least get over it because it's the past. But actually, when you see stuff like that, you go, oh no, I can see why residues of that might still kind of permeate the way that we frame things. So yeah, it was a bit of a rude awakening was Doomwatch, but I still have affection for it, and I dreamed of being John Ridge. Yes, because he was so cool, and anyway, and he's terrible. He's a terrible person. Anyway, I get cross about this now. Because this actor is not credited, and he is a speaking actor. This actor is not credited, and he is a speaking actor. No, nor is this actor. This actor is because he's called Andrew Piper, although he's credited as Andrew Pipe. And the only way I know that is because he's on Twitter and he did a screen grab of himself appearing in the episode. So why is he credited but the previous three are not? It's not like they're doing sort of walk-on three kind of one line here or there. I think they're genuinely, proper hired actors who've been uncredited by a mistake. But because we don't see the paperwork these days, because there's not a... But I've not seen a Doctor Who archive, or it's too late for the complete histories, that I don't know who those actors are, and I think that's a terrible shame. And you look on TARDIS Wiki and things like that, they're not there because the way that we get information now is very different. But I think now that credits move so quickly and that actors get paid so poorly and don't get the same sort of residuals they used to get, the very least they can get is credit on an episode where they have been hired to play a speaking part, because actors are different from extras, and there's big processes that we go through to get jobs, and anyway, credit where credit is due, basically. I've talked about this sort of thing a lot. So, and this era has well, in fact, not just the Chibnall. Modern Who has a number of areas where that happens, and you had one job, but it's a hill that I'm sure, continue fighting on. No, you die on a hill, don't you? You don't fight on it. Yeah, no, me, I'll die on it anyway. Just nobody will notice. Or I'll die on the hill when it's a cheap, low budget hill, and they really need me to die in order to get to make the hill work. But then when there's a hill that's got loads of money, and you don't have to die on it, you just have to hang around on the hill, and do something fairly straightforward, they'll get somebody else to do it and pay them loads. Sorry, see, nothing is out of context. I'm a bit cross about something today. I'm barely talking about. So I like all of this. The airfield gives it a sense of time and place. You get a real feel about what Lenny Henry's character is up to, and his influence, and it explains about the plane. In case one didn't think it made sense. So that's all very good. It's nice to see Mark Dexter turn up. He's a very good actor. Nobody really talks about the fact he was in Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead as the dad. He's the dad that the girl and Dr. Moon are with in the in the other part of the story. And he's a great actor, Mark Dexter. He's been around a long time and he's in loads of things. And he's not doing much in this scene, but he's totally engaged with it. He's a bit like the Joker, isn't he? I think that's what Sacha Dhawan is channeling here. I mean, this is horrible, and it's supposed to be, and it's pretty nasty, isn't it? He's really dangerous and quite vicious. Which is a kind of new reading of the Master. We know the Master has been cruel and callous, but there's a real dangerous edge. I'm not sure I like it, but that is the sort of point. But I think I think with the previous Masters, well, certainly with this is horrible. You see, this is really cruel, and the Doctor is never cruel or cowardly. But I don't think Doctor Who is often cruel and cowardly, and this is where I think, and this is because I'm not quite sure, because I think sometimes my objections are contradictory, so we all have to sort of then go back and say, well, are things a matter of taste? That was a really cruel and horrible moment, and I think there's something about the cruelty of it that seems slightly undoctor. It's a bit like the kind of Eric Saywood way of going, we're grown up by doing stuff that is, deliberately grim. But then again, I like Doctor Who when it's grim, and I did find this uncomfortable to watch, and maybe that's the point. It is really an uncomfortable scene, but I can see what they're trying to do with the Master to make him really sort of dangerous and unhinged and psychotic, and a real psychopath. I thought Mrs. psychopathic nature, though, had a sort of Time Lordy, slightly zany edge to it that was no less real. But this is really, I mean, he does a great job. It's odd. I'm not sure where I am with this, and that's fine. I love that Doctor Who makes me think and makes me question myself, and you know, there is a duality to our enjoyment of the show, isn't it? Is that I sort of like it when it's nasty and violent sometimes, and the Hinchcliffe era is amongst the most violent and most nasty, but it's always got that sort of sardonic humour and muscular intelligence running through it as well. But I mean, as an announcement for this new Master, this is the face-off between, and it's hard because this is now the 1, 2. We'll count the 2 Decade Masters as the same 1, 3, 4, 5. So this is the 6th, maybe even 7th Master that we've had. Another line for the big inventor guy who doesn't get a credit. You can't just have somebody. Gone are the days where Anthony Ainley was obviously there to sort of echo and pay tribute to Roger Delgado in a way, but I don't think you could now. We didn't have videos in those days, so an echo of the old Master was a way of continuing the character. But we've never really done that with a Time Lord at any other point where you go, well, the new version should echo the last version. That's the complete opposite of what we would do, and yet it seemed right to do that with the Master because I can imagine people seeing the Decade Master for the first time and going, that's a real aberration. That's an unnecessary reimagining of the character made so definitive by Roger Delgado, and in rather poor taste, seeing as he's no longer with us. And yet, for me, it's part of the rich tapestry of Doctor Who history because it happened before I was born. But yes, the idea that you would have a new regeneration of the Master that was now aping a much loved actor who was no longer available for whatever reason is to squander an opportunity of what you do with a Time Lord. Is that you go, well, no, it's a new version of that character. They've still got to have the same characteristic. It's the Doctor. They've got to be exciting and fun and adventurous and have a moral core. And if it's the Master, they have to be nasty and scary and up to diabolical schemes. But then how do we present that? So there's no wrong or right way of doing the Master, so long as you fit within the Master's modus operandi. So for Sacha Dhawan to make, to do the interpretation that he does, I think is a really excellent interpretation. But I find that scene uncomfortable. But maybe I'm supposed to. But it is quite sadistic and quite that bit where he looks like he's going to spare the person, then casually kills them. It's really grim, and I would absolutely lap that up in other eras. So I've got to look to myself on that one. It means I've talked through the bit where Graham and Ryan and Yaz stamp on their phones and are talked to, by Lenny Henry, which does a little bit ape the bit in Sound of Drums, Last of the Time Lords, where they're sort of told by the John Sim Master that they're being tracked and traced and have to go underground. I think in Last of the Time Lords that had a real feel of an urban thriller about it. It was like an episode of Spooks with Doctor Who in it, which I think was really successful. This, like quite a lot actually of this episode, feels to me like it does seem to me that Chris Chibnall has gone, oh well, they did that in an old episode, so I'll do that. It'll work just as well, and it doesn't, because it's not done as well, and because it's already been done before. Anyway, that's not what That's not. This is nice. I like the candlelight here. The color scheme is very, very nice. I looked up the actress playing Ada, who's not done a massive amount, but she's in a band. But this is a really nice showcase part for her, which you would have expected, wouldn't you? A young actress playing such a key part. Like I talked about this in House of Via Diodati, where the young cast haven't gone on to be the next Felicity Jones or Carey Mulligan or Andrew Garfield. It just goes to show how Doctor Who back in those days just seemed to be, hitting all of the right notes. And there's nothing wrong with an young actress being given a break playing Ada Lovelace in Doctor Who and not becoming next year's Oscar nominee. And I'm sure she's working hard and doing great stuff, and it just goes to show that just having a guest role in Doctor Who is not necessarily a passport to world domination. But it did seem like that would be the case for a while. Mark Dexter's been around a long time, but he never seems to quite age. But he's perfect casting for this sort of thing. I do like period Doctor Who. I liked Ada Lovelace with the machine gun, by the way. That was good fun. And it's good that she, took it upon herself to help the Doctor in that situation. See, now I like all of this scaffolding and these barriers. This sort of, again, this feels like urban underground. Nice. I assume that's a crane shot. You probably do that with a drone now. Do they have drones? They don't know. So this is a nice atmospheric setting. Unfortunately, everyone now just sits around and talks, and I find there's a lot of this. I mean, there's a similar scene, isn't there, in The End of Time. Oh no, and there's one in Last of the Time Lord Sound of Drums. But one in Last of the Time Lord Sound of Drums, they get the Torchwood message and the message from Vivian Rook, and there is it manages to make the exposition and the catch up and the exchange of dialogue much more organic, much more artfully seeded in. I do find that there's quite a lot of everyone just sits not only and explains the plot, but also we have moments where everyone needs to sit around and tell each other how they feel. Again, not very artfully worked into proceedings. That's sorry, I'm just saying where I struggled again. But I'm but like that scene with the Master, I am happy to talk myself round as well. But this is all very on the nose. What have we got at our disposal? Well, shall we discuss it? I've got these. It's everyone sits around and talks their way out of the problem. There's I'm sure in other hands, you would exchange this information whilst holding a door shut while somebody else is trying to break in, or whilst you're on the run from something else, or while you're trying to do another part of the plot. Here they've just sort of I just find it's fairly unimaginatively done, and it feels like it's brought the whole episode to a close. There's no furtive atmosphere here. They're all having a lovely time. It's not it adding to the atmosphere. It's slowed the pace right down. This is good though. I think the direction here actually in the whole thing has been superb, and I like the urban setting, and I like the companions losing themselves in the the urban desolation. Oh, and now here we are in the Second World War, and again another kind of education to me, and another female protagonist from history, which I think is and I think it behoves us to have programs set in, especially with, as I record this country is undergoing various bits of societal breakdown, shall we say, of a very unpleasant kind, and I think there are huge schisms within our society and lots of very unpleasant communication, and it behoves us to remember that, you know, within a living memory. My mum's 80 now, and she was born in 43, so she was born during the war, so just about living memory. I was talking to Laurie Webb recently, who was Mr. Ollis in The Three Doctors, who was on Normandy Beach as a young man. My goodness, you know, it behoves us to remember that the things that come to us all too easily, division, dishonesty, malignant actions from those in charge or in positions of power, can cause great breakdowns and schisms and terrible things to happen. And so I think, you know, a reminder, you know, World War II iconography was in a lot of the entertainment that was around when I was a kid, and it meant that, you know, you were never too far away from asking those questions or seeing the terrible things that happened in it. This reminds me a bit of, isn't there a bit in one of the, I was going to say the new Star Wars films, but the first two, I don't think that's funny or good, sorry. I know what it's trying to do. It's trying to say, well, he's obviously not a skilled laser shooter, so let's do that thing of having, oh, he manages to kill them all in an amusingly accidental fashion. But one, I don't find that particularly funny, because I think it's a dishonest way of getting your violence out of the way with, and I just, there's something about the man dancing with laser beams coming out of his feet that doesn't look great, and it doesn't sound great, and it doesn't feel great. Sorry. Oh dear, am I going too far the other way? Because now I like this. I find this really compelling. I think it's really. I love the fact that it's sort of so petty almost, and I love the way his mum just sort of eyeballs him, and she's not a well-known actress or anything, but she only has a handful of lines, but she has real status within this scene, so it means they're both doing it very well. But I am very much drawn to the idea. I'm drawn to the Larkin, you know, and as the son of parents and as the father of children, I think our familial ties, and we have a fairly functional family of slight oddballs, and we're all, you know, but we all function. Nobody hates each other, but there are, and there have been in the past as well, and I've got, you know, huge resentments. I would say I have hugely complicated dynamics with both of my parents. My dad wasn't around, which means my mother bears the brunt of anything that involved a parent who was present, and so I'm, you know, I think it's a base, it's a fundamental kind of motivator, and I like the fact that this, you know, all-powerful tech guy who has sexy sun-drenched parties is actually, it all kind of boils down to the fact that he resents his mum, and then when he's got the power to do so, he sort of takes revenge. That's all to me very human and very nice writing and good motivation. Now this is really interesting stuff because you know, all this stuff, you know, hiding under the floorboards. This all buys into that World War II iconography, and you know, and we know that stuff like this actually happened. And you know, not hundreds of years ago when people weren't really like us or anything like that. You know, this is only a couple of generations ago. The conditions under which people had to live, and then the bravery that then was required of people. And I've I looked up at the time, and then when I watched this again, you know, I looked up the circumstances of the capture and the escape and she wasn't the only one. There was a group of them, and somebody betrayed them, and they were executed, and these were extraordinarily brave women, and and we're so used to the majority of stories, and understandably so, and of course about because the majority of people who saw action in the Second World War were males of a fighting age. So, and they're the stories that often get portrayed in movies. But Noor Inayat Khan, deserves to be remembered. I think probably deserves to be remembered slightly more than in a children's TV sci-fi show. But I don't think it. I think it treats her with honor and with respect, and shows her to be the brave, gutsy, and obviously remarkable individual that she was. Younger than me, young enough to be my kid now, when she was doing all this extraordinary stuff. And I love that Doctor Who is doing that, and I think it's again quite smart of Chris Chibnall to go, well, if I'm going to have this Doctor interacting with genuine historical characters and crossing different timelines, why not have this trio of remarkable women? And I think I don't think it is. It's interesting that I never consider whether it's acceptable or apt or cheapening of Ada Lovelace or Mary Shelley, because they're farther away. But I slightly worry about Noor Inayat Khan because, well, it's not just because she's more recent, but because obviously she was, she put in fact, in the timeline of this, she doesn't make it for very much longer. And in fact, I think they did film a death scene, didn't they, or certainly a capture scene, which I think they were right to excise because, again, it's that tonal thing. And actually, I think just to find out what happens to her is about that's beautiful shot with the Eiffel Tower in the mirror. That's really beautifully done. That's a clever, subtle visual. The lighting's excellent in this episode. It looks really beautiful. So congratulations. I'm a pacifist. Is the Doctor a pacifist though? And again, this is slightly chibbled to me. Well, I'll just say I'm a pacifist, even though we know that the Doctor, even though I like to think of the Doctor as somebody that doesn't kill and that for whom violence is never the answer, the Doctor does, and violence sometimes is. And I sometimes think more right-wing commentators than I had a very interesting chat with Tim Stanley when I was preparing the Newsnight piece, and he made a very convincing case for Doctor Who not being a lefty pacifist and for actually being an adventure in the mold of early 20th century, sort of Victorian British Empire heroes. And that's because Tim. That's very much the sort of stuff that Tim Stanley identifies with. I more identify with hippy drippy, peaceful people, but yet and all of that, and like to consider, think being pacifist is being decent, but actually, as the Dominators shows, if it's all very well to say you're a pacifist, what happens when bad people want to do bad things? You have to stand up and fight. So and again, having the Doctor say yes, I'm a pacifist is a bit like having the Doctor say yes, knives are bad. It's all sort of say not do. It's very sort of basic. I love that shot of I love the red phone box there. So yes, so I'm trying to, without being, as I say, without being mean, I'm trying to explain why there are certain elements of some of these episodes that I've struggled with. But even as I enunciate them, it seems to me that a lot of it is to do with personal taste, which is why I always doubt anybody, who's sort of desperate to say, well, the thing I like is objectively better than the thing you like, because it's very hard to be objective. But I do think the writing, the way that the themes and subtexts and adventure are wrought within the storytelling are less artful than in either Moffat or Davis Who. Now, I know there are problems with both of those eras as well, and that for some this sort of very fresh and so where I might say not artful enough, other people might say uncomplicated, fresh, straightforward storytelling. That I was listening to a podcast the other day. Actually, it was the one that Joe was involved in, where everyone was really pleased. They were reviewing Jodie Whittaker's first season and saying, after stories that gave me a headache, and had quite a sort of sardonic, smart aleck kind of humour, they were happier with something that was straightforward, with a Doctor who was just fresh and innocent and joyous and fun, and that it was sort of back to basics, and yeah, so and I'm happy to listen to people who get great joy from this. This is there's something about those. I always think of that great Mitchell and Webb sketch about the costumes that the Nazis wear, and they go, "Are we the baddies?" Because they've got skulls and long leather. But the devil gets the best tunes and the best threads, because you can see why puffed up German militarists would enjoy themselves, because it's power. It really is power dressing, isn't it? Which makes Nazi iconography, last very well for science fiction costuming and looks and storytelling, and it reminds me of Starship Troopers, of course, where they're very clever with the way that they make the costumes. Neil Patrick Harris's costume echo the Nazis, and how all these Aryan kids turn out to be from Buenos Aires, and you go, what's going on here? That Starship Troopers is looks like a hugely sort of gung ho all American film, and actually it's a great satire of all of that. That is something that is really artfully done, but also outrageous and over the top and crazy. But yeah, he's got a real edge, hasn't he, Sacha Dhawan? And the master as Nazi is not too big a leap. That's another great visual. Yeah, poor Lenny Henry's mum's dead. Taking it out on the parent. I saw Tosin Cole recently in Supercell, which is a current series on Netflix, and he's excellent in it. And it's a really good series if you like sci-fi, and that is something where the subtext has been really, very cleverly seeped into the concept and the adventure, and it's a sort of, it's an echo of things going on in society today whilst telling a science fiction adventure. I like Lenny Henry's costume too, and the fact that he's that it's all into. I wonder how this will look in the future, because of course I love the fact that it's it's all there's sort of internet, and he's a tech guy and all of that, because tech and internet is all sort of big now. But this will, of course, elements will look quaint in the future. This isn't a criticism, by the way, but we have no idea what people looking back will go, oh, did they really think that? Or they thought that was all well and funky and it's all a bit old hat, And that's the lovely thing about the fact that we know that we'll be watching this stuff in 20, 30 years' time, more than we'll be watching, other programs, even programs that have been bigger hits, and they will live again in different ways. But yes, I didn't really know enough about Noor Inayat Khan, codename Madeline, and I think it's lovely that that Doctor Who has, and I love the fact she's wearing it. She's dressed as what's it called? Listen very carefully. I shall say this only once from Hello Hello. That is the sort of French resistance. I know she's not the French resistance, but that's the undercover agent in France costume. It really is, and I don't mind it because Doctor Who deals in when Doctor Who is in history, it is a sort of picture book version even of this awful atrocious time that the beret and long coat tells us exactly what we should know about her, is that she is somebody working slightly undercover in France, and Heartron Energy from the Deadly Assassin. Deadly Assassin is lurking on my list. I might do that. Might do that next. Let's see. It's horrible, isn't it? That the swastika and the Nazi symbols there, but they do automatically make us feel, these aren't metaphors anymore. This is the actual Nazism, and we know, what that stands for, and it's a pretty bold thing to be invoking. You've got to be very careful when you're dealing with, metaphorical Nazis is one thing, but actual ones from history is you have to be very careful, because I've sometimes wondered. I wonder why Doctor Who didn't do World War II particularly often, and that's because you have to be careful with stuff that is within living memory. As of course if they'd done a Second World War story. Now, yes, there were loads of war films around that time, particularly in the 50s and 60s and 70s, but they were largely made by the people that had experienced the war, which must have been so odd. I mean, I've been reading about Derek Newark, who's Greg Sutton in Inferno, and is in An Unearthly Child as well, and he fought in the jungles, Burma, I think. He killed people with his bare hands, and then was an actor, and in those days we'd work with all sorts of people, and all those people that we watch making our programs were people that lived that did that, and then had to get on with their lives and make our funny programs. But as part of that, they had to make loads of films or TV shows set during the period that they'd sort of served in, and then had to go back to their lives. Which again is why I think we as viewers have to not be glib, and of course as program makers have to not be glib about portrayals of these times. I'm not saying that is the case here, but I think that's why such an obvious place to set a Doctor Who story has not actually been used. It's telling that in the war games they land in World War One, not World War Two. But you see, I think that is a massive misjudgment, and this is where we have real trickiness with how do we say that sort of colourblind casting works. So there's what they said, there's some sort of perception filter there, but then the doctor then weaponizing the Master's ethnicity, but it's not ethnicity, is it? Because it's the Master. How does that regeneration work? It sort of draws attention to what hopefully this casting, which is what I think Bridgerton does so well, is it sort of takes it in its stride and creates its own internal logic. It's really hard, and I don't think anyone's doing anything wrong, but it's really hard when you're doing casting to try and reflect the great variation in people, in the people who make up British society today, when telling stories of the past, or telling any sort of stories to give opportunities to to actors who might have had opportunities denied them in the past. This is all very important stuff. But then I found it a bit with Rogue, where Rogue, the Regency period, there wouldn't be that many people of color in that room. But we go, no, that's fine, because this is a reimagining of that, and that's and we just get over it. We watch as viewers, like I did when I watched the Scottish play at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and young Seawood was played by a black actor and old Seawood was played by a white actor. And I said to my school teacher, I didn't understand that. I was 12, don't cancel me. And she said, oh, well, it's what they do now in theatre, is that the colour of the actor is not supposed to be important. They're father and son because they're called young Seawood and old Seawood, and actually there could be a reason for that anyway, but whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you just went, oh, okay, fine. And that's all it needed. And I go, okay, fine. But then in Rogue, we were also supposed to believe that it was a really prejudiced society where the two gay men dancing was something shocking and dodgy. And you go, so hang on. So it's society that doesn't do this thing where identity is important and difficult and problematic and has issues, but it does do this thing. And it seems to me that the rules kind of, and I think if you're just a sort of casual viewer watching it, it sort of knocks you out of it slightly. And I also think it points sometimes to the difficulty of the way that we progressive liberal writers, theatre makers, television makers or whatever deal with this stuff, because I think it was a real misstep for the Doctor to weaponize the Master, to draw attention to the fact that we now had an actor of colour playing the Master, and so that therefore that could be something that could be used against him. I'm uncomfortable with that, and I don't think it was a particularly bright move. And again, this is where I have an issue with some of this stuff, that some of the scripting or production choices are a bit dim. I think I think destroying Gallifrey again, after, so that the absence of Gallifrey was a great thing when the show was relaunched. You go, okay, so this is the show, but not as we know it, and it makes the Doctor very much an enigma, and that was drawn out over the series where it became very important. And then finally, it was sort of decided many years in, oh well, let's bring it back because that will give us another dimension, and Gallifrey is now a thing, and then it's sort of killed off screen here, having already, it's already been, again, it's sort of like, oh well, Russell killed off Gallifrey, so I'll do that, and I'll do it worse, and with less consequence, and I find this era does that a lot, where it will flourish something like genocide, and use it for very little dramatic purpose, for a throwaway line here or an action within a scene that actually doesn't then reverberate particularly or have much of an impact. I just remember thinking when I learned about Gallifrey being destroyed again, sort of going, that's you're flourishing an ace there. In a point of the card game where you could have equally just used a 4. I've just invented a card game, but that's beautiful shot. That's very good. And he is a bit of a blowhard. So the fact that he's sort of telling them what they're in store for works for me, because his whole motivation is tied in with that. He is a terrible asshole, which means his comeuppance is quite satisfying. But it's odd how he's quite squeamish, isn't he, Chibnall? Chris Noth's character survives twice. Lenny Henry's character survives here. So for that, the cruel. If you're an extra, you die a cruel and rather sadistic death. But the main baddie, can get sort of rather damp squib endings. I like Lenny Henry's comeuppance here in terms of it's a sort of public humiliation. But and here's me saying, what's my attitude towards violence in Doctor Who? But it is more satisfying if the villain gets killed. So, and again, I am aware that is contradictory and slightly hypocritical. Sometimes when as I've said, when I say things before, I am not courting your approval. I am sometimes aware that I might actually think something else in 5 minutes, but I'm trying to react to my instinctual gut reaction to some of this stuff, and to intellectualize it for you, or explain it for you, or contextualize it for you, whilst accepting that I might be completely talking absolute rubbish, or that I might change my mind. And I think as a whole, I think I preferred the first episode of Spyfall, because I really liked the James Bondy spy sort of thing, and I think it's difficult to have this episode have an identity because it moves about so. And there is a lot of standing around talking. Well done, Doctor Who. You outwitted the Master. Oh, that's a nice joke. Oh, and actually, that's an apposite takedown in that I had alluded to the fact it was about technology and the technology was then turned against the Master. But I think it's a brave debut from Sacha Dhawan. I think he is good. And I think I was talking about this before. You can't have every Master to be a sort of variation of Roger Delgado. Roger Delgado is still my favourite, and I think my next favourite is probably Michelle Gomez. Because I think she brought such depth to the part, but also sort of made the psychopathic nature of the Master kind of work. I kind of understood where it came from. So this is where we go back and that's quite Moffat-y, isn't it? I'm never wild about sort of Doctor Who going back in time and Bill and Tedding it. I think that's a cheating use of the time travel element of Doctor Who. But here it's quite fun, and I like the way that all that stuff is there and Ryan has to follow the signs to stop the aircraft crashing. I think that's all good. And it's rather sad that Noor Inayat Khan has to forget Doctor Who. That's really nice. That's very nice. And you kind of, and we haven't been told yet, have we? But the Doctor knows her history, and I think that's quite sensitively done. And as I say, I think it would have been tonally quite crass to have then portrayed what happened to her. I love these period settings for Doctor Who as well. And I love seeing the TARDIS in an old sort of drawing room. It's, again, beautiful lighting and direction. That's quite sad. But that's nice that she said, well, actually, yes, because again, it would have cheapened Ada Lovelace to have said, oh, she only found it out because of Doctor Who. That's, again, you have to be quite careful when you're invoking historical characters, because you don't want Doctor Who to be taking the credit for great advances of interesting people. I mean, it doesn't matter because it's only a fiction, and hopefully, what this does is that it would make people, kids go and read and find out. Well, or grown-ups. I read about both. Yeah, you see, this just seems to me to be a less satisfactory rerun of something that's gone before. We have it with the, in War of the Sontarans, where we get a replay of the Christmas invasion. It just seems when you're not made that many episodes to be cut. There are certain types of story you can do over again, but taking the same sort of scenes and tropes and actual events, and especially as this was an event that happened that had then been reversed, to then sort of reverse it back again, which is a bit my sort of objection to bringing the Master back so quickly. Not because of anything Sacha Dhawan had done, but it's because that had been done so well. It just seemed to be a bit sort of crass. The lighting is great in this. The lighting is very good, and I think even this TARDIS set, which I'm not wild about. He's doing William Hartnell there. I like the fact he's doing William Hartnell there. And I like these hologram sort of TARDIS messages. He's really psychotic. He's got a real sort of simmering. This is setting the roots for the for the timeless child and all of that, which I'm sure I will talk about if anyone chooses. Nobody's chosen those episodes yet. Look, I hope that. Yeah, I've been told that a couple of times. I've been obviously really struggling to be positive about something I might not be positive about. So that I should try and be honest. But I also know that a great number of you listen to this because you don't want to hear somebody slagging off your favourite episodes, and I totally understand that. And there are many podcasts where people are very rude about episodes of Doctor Who that I listen to and really, really enjoy. But I know that people listen to these which are called Happy Times and Places because I try my best to accentuate the positive where I can. But I'm not yet at the stage where I really know the Chibnall era well enough. I've seen each of the episodes a couple of times, and I've read the interviews in Doctor Who magazine, but that's kind of as far as it goes. And maybe I need to start deep diving, or if I am to have the audacity to podcast about something, I should maybe be bringing something more interesting to the table. But I wanted to have a bash because Jodie Whittaker is underrepresented here. The Chibnall era is underrepresented in these, and Joey is such a positive force. He may be well. This is maybe what I have to do with some of these, is to get somebody on who can sort of knock me out of my sort of instinctive view and offering me a perspective that makes me appreciate these shows that are clearly made by people who care and put a lot of hard work in and have a great love for Doctor Who and as I've been recording these episodes, Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill are coming back to do Doctor Who for Big Finish, which I think is absolutely extraordinary. I think it's amazing what Big Finish have pulled off in terms of getting, I remember when Paul McGann will definitely never do a convention, let alone come back to Doctor Who. Christopher Eccleston will never do a convention, let alone come back to Doctor Who. Well, Tom Baker will never do an audio Doctor Who, and all of those things have happened. And then, maybe for those people for whom the TV version of this Doctor has not quite done the business. Maybe Big Finish will reframe, re-energize, reinvigorate people's appreciation, or actually invigorate this this era. Although, as I say that, Orphan 55 has just loomed. So look, I really don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I come to this. I've had quite this week's been a bit of a ball ache for many reasons in Hadoke Towers, and so maybe my mood informs that as well. I have genuinely tried, but I did have ringing in my ears, the odd correspondent saying, "Look, it's all right to sometimes surrender to your instinct if it's to not be over the moon about something." You didn't want me going, "Oh, I like that badge, I like his haircut," or whatever. So I have to choose 3 things about part 2 of Spyfall that I like. Well, I really like. I think the direction is excellent, but it's more than that. It's the sort of the color palette, the lighting, the composition of the pictures, that beautiful reflection of the Eiffel Tower in the window, the light streaming into Norinyak Khan's room, the silhouettes of some of the characters, that Lenny Henry with the stark lights behind him, the shots in the warehouse. There's some really beautiful picture composition, but a lot of that to do with the lighting and the color grading. So whatever that is is 1. 2, I think the fact that Jodie Whittaker, the first canonical, well, not canonical is wrong, but the first female doctor we encountered in order in the playing the series' actual lead. It all gets complicated how we even put this stuff now, isn't it? Encounters 2 remarkable women from history, and I think both of those characters are treated with respect, and are appropriate accomplices for the Doctor in this adventure. And it's very, very. I think Jodie Whittaker did that lovely when she says "bonne chance" to Norinyak Khan, and I think the fact that the memories of the Doctor are taken away, so that those characters are still allowed to represent themselves in history. I think that's really sensitively handled and well judged, and I thought it was they were a good choice of protagonists to have in this part of the adventure. And the third thing that I really like, I think it's got to be that Lenny Henry was motivated by hate for his mother. I just thought, you can have all that sort of highfalutin spacefaring stuff, but that I think got to the nub of and people can do terrible things for the most sort of straightforward of reasons. And I thought, and I actually thought the actress did a really lovely job of that sort of inscrutable sort of face-off that she did. And I thought Lenny Henry conveyed well the fact that, there's a sort of spiteful childishness behind that facade of, power and innovation and money and wealth and all of that sort of stuff. I thought that's a really that spoke to me, I think, about the banality of evil in a way, and I thought it was well rendered, and it was also quite witty. It wasn't played for laughs, but there is something quite funny about bloke whose first thing he does is wheel his mother out and take revenge on her. I thought that was good. So those are my 3 things. What has lovely Joe Ford? Oh, excuse me, lovely Joe Ford said about Spyfall Part 2?
My first thing for Spyfall Part 2 is it's more of a tone than anything. And again, I'm going to mention Series 11, which I think was very worthy and thoughtful and intelligent, especially episodes like Punjab and Rosa and It Takes You Away. But it wasn't a lot of fun, it was kind of worthy. And I remember back to Chibnall writing Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and The Power of Three, and he's having so much fun. I thought that was what he was going to bring to Doctor Who. So I was quite shocked when I watched Series 11 at just how serious it was. He's having a lot of fun with Spyfall, leaning into the tropes of the Bond movies. And the scene I want to point out is what I've heard somebody else say on social media is the nadir of Doctor Who, and that is Graham O'Brien doing the old soft shoe shuffle with his laser shoes, taking out secret agents. I mean, that's just camp and silly. It's bloody ridiculous. I love it. Let me tell you something now. Life, yeah, as an adult, can be very serious and a bit underwhelming. All right. Anything that taps into that excitement that you got from Doctor Who as a child and laser shoes, come on, laser shoes? I would love to have laser shoes. I just think it's very silly. Let me tell you, Doctor Who has been very silly for 60 years, a lot of it. And I think this is silly. It's just pitched at the right level. And yeah, I was laughing my head off. And who better than Bradley Walsh to deliver something as utterly ridiculous as that? I love that scene unapologetically.
Well, I love you unapologetically, Joe, even though I hate that scene and think it's awful. And isn't that good? And maybe this is what we must hope for in some of these episodes, where isn't it lovely to have, because he makes a very convincing case, and he's a fine and insightful advocate, but just coming from a different place and receiving things in a different way. And I have to say, I do have sympathy with the observation that Doctor Who can sometimes be too serious, and I think my love for Doctor Who has in the past suffered from being too serious. That whenever and I see it now in some commentators online where people get sort of very angry about Doctor Who should be, because Doctor Who is silly. The whole point of Doctor Who is that it is silly, but it is whether you enjoy the silliness and you let it coexist with the utter deadly seriousness. And sometimes it's serious intent of social commentary or emotional truth, and sometimes it's serious intent to be horrifying and thrilling and all of those things. But it never shies away from its ridiculousness, because actually you can't, because one, you get too po-faced, and there's nothing worse than po-faced science fiction. There's nothing worse than things where everybody's from a dynasty of this and a dynasty of that, and they've got apostrophes in their names, and they all stare at each other very seriously, talking absolute rot about something some writers very pleased that they came up with, that's all deeply serious and po-faced and boring. The reason I like Doctor Who is because the hero, the Doctor, is fun and exciting and really good to be with, and sometimes the show does crazy things and goes, yeah, so what? So Joe is saying nothing that isn't out of and my argument's arsenal, if you like, for why Doctor Who is the show that it is, and its sense of humour is really a part of it. I just don't think that's executed in a particularly witty and funny way, but that's because I'm a terrible old snob, and maybe I should get. And certainly my enjoyment of Doctor Who, and some Doctor Who that I didn't like back in the day, has improved as I've got older and got over myself. And as I say, I do see some modern commentators who think, oh, especially those who are very keen to say, you'll miss the whole message of Doctor Who. And what they mean is that, it's a liberal show about understanding people. And that is my reading of the show. It's not the only reading of the show, but no, I guess where they're coming from. But I'm coming from the same place. But I do also think, yeah, but the other message of the show is get over yourself and stop being so serious and certainly sanctimonious, because the show is about nonsense and fun and silliness too. So you've used portions of my own worldview and argument to celebrate something that doesn't quite work for me. So that's got me all in a tiz, and I'm absolutely fine with that. That's good. That's good. I will leave this probably. Well, what that will mean is I will, next time I watch Spyfall, I will go in being aware that there are some bits that might work if I approach them in a different way. There will be some bits I'm sure I'll go, still don't like that bit. But it means I will go back and I will watch it and I will see new things and I will appreciate things in a different way. And some I will like more and some I will like less. And sometimes it will just depend on the mood I'm in. But that's because that's what being a Doctor Who fan is. Number 2.
My next choice is slightly controversial, but let me explain myself. So I want to choose the entire sequence on top of the Eiffel Tower between the Doctor and the Master. And there's a lot going on in that scene. And I think Whittaker and Dewan have a really interesting chemistry. It's a bit violent. It's the first person we've seen be like kind of really violent towards the 13th Doctor. I love the callback to Logopolis, because it really allows you to sense the weight of the Doctor-Master relationship. And I really love sort of how they dance around each other. How it's shot as well is really lovely. It's like they're dancing around each other on top of the Eiffel Tower. But the moment that really stands out is the incredibly shocking moment where the Doctor reveals who the Master is to the Nazis, and he is taken away to probably suffer terrible punishment. It's an appalling thing that the Doctor does. Absolutely appalling. And I want to make that very clear that I am not saying that the Doctor doing that is a good thing. I think it's shocking. But the shock of it kind of made me sit back in a way with Jodie Whittaker's character that I haven't before, because she was doing something so revolting. And she is a bit nicey nice at times. Certainly in series 11, there was a lot of her making her very likable, very agreeable. And I quite like it when the Doctor shocks me like that. I think it's quite an interesting thing for the writer to do. I don't agree with the Doctor strangling Perry, but it was certainly a fascinating avenue for the show to go down. I don't agree with the Doctor committing infanticide in The Runaway Bride on Christmas Day, but I think that was a very brave thing for Rusty Davies to do. So I don't like any of these moments. I think it's appalling what she does, but it adds a shade to her character that is more interesting. So that's a very personal one. Toby, I very much doubt that you're going to get that one, but it's essentially the Doctor being unlikable. Go figure. That's my second thing. I quite like it when my heroes make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but what she does is absolutely appalling. So it's a bit of a catch-22, that one.
Now that's interesting, Joe, because I had a completely different reading of it, but I'm loving this because this is, I mean, one I hadn't really thought, and this is where the shortcomings of this format of broadcasting come in, because I was trying to find things interesting to say during that long scene between the Master and the Doctor on the Eiffel Tower, when it would probably be more interesting for me to shut up and listen to it and then respond to it afterwards, because there was a lot going on that I was talking over and not finding difficult to take in. And I did watch this episode in preparation for this podcast, but actually it's been a week or so, if not, and I'd remembered more the scene in The Inventors where he's shrinking people and being really, really cruel, because I think, I discussed, how uncomfortable that made me feel. But this, again, you're using my own arguments in support of something I would have argued against for different reasons, and I find that fascinating. So I'm undergoing a lot of self-examination and navel gazing here. What, Toby, in your massive monologue? Yes, what a surprise. But because I get very cross with people who respond to, again, lots of modern commentators on Twitter, usually sort of cross people who want to tell everybody off, who sort of say, "Oh, you're telling me that this character did this, and therefore the writer thinks this." No, the writer is giving the character this thing to do. That not everything you give your characters to do in a script are you necessarily approving of. It's like on Twitter, when people say tweets do not represent my company. The dialogue I give my characters doesn't necessarily say what I think, and that includes the Doctor. And we know the Doctor's often done things that we're supposed to actually call into question. So long as and if you're giving the Doctor something to do that the audience is supposed to go away and go, "Oh, that's a bit dodgy." So long as we know that the production, is raising an eyebrow, or the writer, or even the actor, but the actor has to do it more subtly because they cannot signal this, but that we know that the show isn't necessarily going, because the Doctor's doing it, it is the right thing to do. Now, I there's nothing, unfortunately for me, in a lot of the writing that suggests to me that tricky moment that Joe explained away so well there, and has made me reconsider it. And I will, and I may be more generous to it next time I come. Sometimes, isn't it? It's all it takes is somebody to say, "But what about this?" It's a bit like when I don't like the paving slab bit in Love and Monsters, and then somebody said, "Yeah, but he's an unreliable narrator," and you go, "Oh yeah, why didn't I think of that in the?" I sort of did know that because obviously of the way that it's shot and the way that it's done and all that. But because I don't like the paving slab bit, I've sort of blinded to that by my dislike for it to sort of look generously on it in a way that makes me go, "Oh no, okay, yeah, of course, yeah, that's part of the whole thing." So, but that said, I don't think there's any. I think there are so many areas where the writing hasn't been smart that I'm less inclined to think that this is a smart piece of writing where the script is going, "Well, we're making the Doctor do this and we are supposed to be uncomfortable with that," rather than, "I think I'm uncomfortable with this because it's a major misjudgment." Now, that is all about what feelings we have about, or one has about, the writing or the characterization or anything. And if you are inclined to be less generous about it, like me, you will go, "Well, that was a bit of a poorly judged sequence," whereas Joe comes from with totally different stimuli and comes in and goes, "No, this absolutely speaks to me," and the uncomfortability, the uncomfortableness is the kind of the point, and I'm prepared to be persuaded in that direction. So maybe as I say, that's what this is that maybe you have to listen to me moaning for an hour. I don't think I did moan for an hour. I think I tried to be. I don't think I was ever deliberately unkind or spiteful, but I had to try and as I say, I had to try and couch my feelings in the reality of my reactions. But yeah, maybe that's why you have to listen to me moaning for an hour, and then somebody comes and goes, "No, Toby, get over yourself. This works because of this, and this." And I found Joe a stunning advocate for, again, interestingly, the two bits that I was particularly critical of. So isn't that fun, everybody? Isn't that fun? Is it fun? I don't know what it is, but look, hopefully it's better than listening to a bad song while you're having your run or walking your dog or on your way to work. I hope that's all I can hope for. I'm better than a bad song. There we go. What's Joe's third thing? I hope he doesn't do it in the form of a bad song.
Okay, and my last thing is Ada Lovelace, who I think is somebody I knew nothing about, and it's leaning back into Sydney Newman's idea of Doctor Who educating. So I found out quite a bit about Ada Lovelace because of this episode, and then I went and read online and learned more. So that whole thing about kind of introducing elements of history and then giving you the opportunity to there's your proof. I actually did that with this episode. And the reason I chose Ada as well is because I think the Chibnall era spotlights fascinating, important women in history, which is something Doctor Who has never really done before. You might think that's an obvious route to go down with a female Doctor, but it means that we get scenes of, the Doctor and Ada or Rosa or any of the others that we've looked into. You get these scenes with just strong, amazing women driving the plot and being amazing, acing the Bechdel test. It's something for the show to be proud of. Not every show is achieving that, and we're learning a lot as well. And I think Ada is beautifully performed. She is extremely able. I love it when she's using the weapons against the Master in the exhibition. And I felt really sorry for her when the Doctor took her memories away. It's another one of those moments where I was a bit unsure about what the Doctor was doing, but found it quite interesting because they'd chosen to go down that route. So yeah, Ada Lovelace, great character, learned a lot. So thank you for that, Chris Chibnall.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, and I, in fact, I get a point for that because I think I chose Ada and Noor. And I thought the memory wiping is one of those where you do feel a bit of a sort of loss. I still hate the fact that Jamie and Zoe lose their memories at the end of the War Games, even though they've now been given back thanks to Tales from the TARDIS, which is definitely canon now because I've always wanted Jamie and Zoe to get their memories back. But there, of course, it's important. I actually saw that as a positive because it was giving her own agency for the historical events that she then went on to, be a pioneer in. And that it wasn't that it was all down to Doctor Who, but I do love the image of her with the machine gun. I think that's great. That to me is Doctor Who take an historical character, particularly a sort of a sort of slightly demure female historical character, and have a with a sort of cyberpunk machine gun to undermine the most dangerous villain in the universe. Terrific. That's very, very Doctor Who. And I think because I've always thought about this era and about the female Doctor, but I've never quite taken a step back and looked at how that was used to facilitate so many strong female characters from history, and that is something that was obviously a policy, and one that was had been a long time coming, but yet doesn't seem too obvious. It doesn't seem to stick out as, oh God, someone's all bloody women or whatever, because it doesn't, and it feels appropriate for this Doctor, and yet also organic to the show, and I think that's a very impressive element, and it goes to reframe the sort of supporting characters that we have to give a lot of little girls watching, an insight into the fact that there are role models for them all through the back catalogue of history that they might not have been taught about in school or in the famous books of literature or indeed reference books, but they're there, and maybe Doctor Who's made them now slightly easier to find or slightly more likely to be learnt about, and so that's all fantastic. And I thought Joe put that very well. But I think I get a point for that. Hurrah! I mean, I haven't won or anything anywhere near, but I've just smashed the Sensorites and done very well with Ambassadors of Death. So I think I'll take a loss on. I think I'll take a loss on Spyfall. Joey is a lovely fella, and I'm always very pleased to hear from him. He's a very even-handed, decent-minded person who works like a dog. I mean, he does about 742,629 different podcasts. They're all really good quality, and he has absolute enthusiasm, and he gets great guests on, and he reacts with his guests very nicely. And I'll always do anything he asks me because I enjoy his company, and I enjoy what he brings to Doctor Who fandom and broadcasting. And let's see, he's looks like he's got a couple of minutes on the clock to plug whatever he's going to plug. So let's hear from him now.
My last choice, my bonus choice.
Oh, damn, he's chosen a bonus thing. I can never remember with the two-parters. Well, I thought it was supposed to be just 3 from each episode, but I sometimes give out the wrong information. Anyway, let me quickly think. Okay, the last one, I think, because I always love it when Doctor Who, even though Doctor Who should be timeless, it's always interesting at the time and to look back on when it taps into, something of the day. The Autons are scary now because of the concept and what they are, but they were, but at the time, there was a sudden increase in plastic, and we go, oh, let's do a plastic thing, so there are things that don't necessarily date, but yet could only have come from the time of the stories they are set. And I think the fact that the villain is tapping into the internet and data and all of that is Doctor Who doing the very, very clever thing that it often does, which is saying what's something that's prevalent right now, that's on people's minds right now, that means that Doctor Who is reacting to the world around it to tell a story that we will still be watching in 20 years' time. And I don't think it will do the story any harm whatsoever, the fact that it has that as its motivation for the villain. And actually, it will be very interesting because it will make us go, oh, God, yeah, because that was at a time when this, and this. And these days we do that, and that. And, people shouldn't be scared of the internet because of this. Or, God, if only we knew how scary the internet was going to get. So it's almost its own history lesson as our relationship evolves with it as we get further away from a story that was very much embedded in its time. And I think that's one of the great beauties of Doctor Who, in that it's of its time and it's timeless, and it can be both of those things at once. And I think having a story that played into our fears and the possibilities of despotism via the medium of cyberspace is a good one. So I wonder if Joe has chosen that.
My last choice, my bonus choice, is the score by Second Akinola. And that's probably a bit of an obvious one. But I think in series 11, there's a kind of leaning into it being ambient music, and less intrusive than what Murray Gold was bringing out before. And I think Akinola as well, when actually I can raise my game a bit here. Not that the music is bad in any way, I just don't think it's quite as apparent. And so what you get with Spyfall is this amazingly hummable and exciting like Bond pastiche score. So the bit where they're going to casino is really fun. The crazy sort of dynamism as they're on the motorbikes in the vineyard shooting away, Lenny Henry shooting away at them. And in particular, the Spy Master theme that plays, various bits of it play throughout episode 1, and then it all culminates in the Master reveal and the cliffhanger. And it is one of the best pieces of Doctor Who music ever. It starts slow, it builds and builds and builds until it is dynamic and dramatic and explosive, just like that plane. Go and listen to that on YouTube. It is a phenomenal piece of music. I think Akinola really raises game in Series 12, but I think his best score comes in Spyfall. And that is my bonus choice. And that's 3 apiece and a bonus choice. And that is me out. Anything else you need? Let me know.
Ah, well, there we go. Well, I will plug Joe's Hamster with a Blunt Penknife podcast, which is always great fun. And I particularly have been enjoying recently the Strictly Come Hamster, where people sort of vote in and advocate for their favourite stories of a season and have a big old argument. And some of these go on for hours, and they're great for if you're doing the garden or you've got a long walk or something like that. And Joe is always such an enthusiastic. I mean, he's a bit rude, but I mean everything. You don't have to be all that rude for me to find you a bit rude. But he's so disarming that even I, who has an aversion to things that are a bit rude, finds it the acceptable face of rudeness, the acceptable arse cheek of rudeness. If I was to do it in a way that's a bit rude. I will go and listen to that Sega Nakanola track because I hadn't really noticed. I've noticed the music in part one, which was a bit Bond pastiche and is good. And I like Sega Nakanola stuff. I'm a sucker for Doctor Who incidental music. I would often rather listen to that than pop. But and it's it's the soundtrack of my youth, isn't it? But I think I probably don't know the era well enough to have too many musical motifs from this era that have resonated too much with me. So that's a thing that will happen as I keep coming back and revisiting, and maybe I need to listen to the scores on their own as well. But I certainly remember enjoying his music. I'm a Murray Gold fan too as well, though. But the freshness and change that he brought to it, but not enough to have selected it for this episode, so I resoundingly lost. But I like to think there's a little victory to be had as this podcast is now clocking into the past the hour and a half mark. That if you're a fan of the era, I hope I wasn't unnecessarily harsh on bits that you like, and I hope that maybe I've learnt to get different perspective via Joe towards the end. I hope so. I don't know. I certainly always go into these things with positive intent. I know that people who make television programs work very hard and only want to entertain us, and that there are a lot of very skilled and talented people involved in making Doctor Who in every era, including this one. So I would never, I never want to denigrate the work of others as well. But I have to try and be honest about how I reacted. Have reacted to these episodes. But I hated the Happiness Patrol until probably about the year 2000, and now I absolutely love it. So any criticism I have of any Doctor Who must be must be borne in mind for the fact that I will still watch this more than I will read Thomas Hardy or in fact do anything. It's all within a context of I love everything with the Doctor Who logo on it because it pulls me and it pushes me and it entertains me and it infuriates me, but I'm fascinated by it and I'll change my mind on it and I'll keep coming back to it and engage with it. I will always be engaged. I will never be a passive viewer of Doctor Who, and this is part of my process. I hope that in the process I've provided you with, if not insight, I hope entertainment, and certainly not, I hope, annoyance. And and I thank you for listening for this rare foray for me into the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who. How exciting that she's going to have another stab at the role with Mandip Gill, who I think is great, in Big Finish. And I wonder what the audio medium and different writers will bring to these Doctors, because Big Finish has these characters in this era, because Big Finish has a habit of shining different lights on different on eras and characters that we're familiar with, and exposing all sorts of strengths and intriguing ways of telling those stories and framing those characters in that era, which are often very, very beneficial. So hurrah. And thanks for sticking with this, and I will look forward to the next time I broadcast to you, but I will be on safer ground for me. I'm going to go, I think, don't hold me to this, but I think I'm going to go and hit a bit of the Deadly Assassin, which is a story that has been revalued a bit lately. I get the sense that some people are quite cool on it. I absolutely love it, and I'm sure that will shine through in my biased broadcasting. But it's simply because I'm more familiar with it, so I think it will be less stumbly, and I will have more things to grasp and to discuss. But anyway, thanks for listening to this. I suppose what that means is that in 10 years' time I can revisit all of these when I've watched Spyfall another 20 times and can quote from it and tell you all sorts of facts about the actors. But I'm not there yet. But anyway, thanks so much for listening. and I will speak to you on the next episode of Happy Times and Places. But for now, cue titles. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest this time around, who is Joe Ford, who can be found on Twitter at DocOho. I'm grateful to Joe and for the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedstone, Stephen Moffat, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Christoph Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sarillo, and Frank Shales. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases, bonus material, 3 releases a week, plus picture of my dog on a Tuesday, and all sorts of other bits and bobs, including your own exclusive podcast, Far Too Much Information, monthly AMAs, and pictures and footage and bits and bobs from behind the scenes of the various Blu-ray and DVD extras that I do, as well as other things that I may get from my archive or some interviews with people involved in the show that I don't put out here. That's all for, as I say, as little as £3 a month, and you can get a 10% discount on that, or indeed any of the tiers, if you sign up for a year in one go. You can also do one-off donations if that's what you'd prefer to do without getting tied into any sort of commitment at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. Or if you want to assist without having to make any financial contribution, and I totally get that, I am just grateful to you for listening, you can go to Apple and iTunes and Spotify and Patreon and all the places that you get podcasts and give these a 5-star rating and like and subscribe and give a few lines of review, and that really helps to enable other people to be made aware of these who might not. These are also now uploaded automatically onto YouTube, so subscribe to my YouTube channel, Toby Hadoke, easy to find, and maybe watch them and give them a thumbs up and all that sort of thing. And again, any comments really help on the YouTube versions. There's no video, it's just a sort of placeholder, and the audio goes there, but it's another way of digesting my output. God, don't like the sound of that. Would you like to digest my output? Oh dear. I'm on all the social medias at Hadoke Podcasts on Twitter/X, at Toby Hadoke if you want to know more about me than the podcasts, because I'm a working circuit comedian. I'm also a writer and an actor, and there's more to me than just Doctor Who. But some people just want to know about Doctor Who, and that's fine. But if you want to know about the other stuff that I do, at Toby Hadoke on Twitter/X, also at Toby.Hadoke on Instagram, and I have a Facebook page as well. I think I've been quite long enough on this one, but my sister is staying right now. She's about to go on holiday, and I asked her, because I remembered her and her daughter watching new Doctor Who, and this was quite a surprise, because obviously I was brought up in the shadow of I was the only one that watched Doctor Who, and it was a bit of a joke, especially when you've got older brothers and sisters. But even my cool uncle from London, who worked in the media, watched Doctor Who when it came back, and they all loved it, and they were all big watchers of David Tennant and Catherine Tate, etc. But I knew my sister didn't watch it anymore, and I'd wondered if she'd been drawn to watch the Jodie Whittaker era, because my sister's very strong on women's rights and all of that sort of thing, and whether that had been something to lure her in. And also, she was at college with Chris Chibnall. In fact, I saw Chris Chibnall in a production of Bent by Martin Sherman. The costumes were designed by my sister. I must still have the programme somewhere, so I'd always remembered his name. He played the lead, and when I saw his name popping up on things, I'd missed that he was the guy on Open Air for some reason. But his name started popping up on things, and so I discovered quite late that he was a Doctor Who fan, and she never told me at the time. But yeah, it's weird how Doctor Who does pop into my life, sometimes forwards, sometimes backwards. But of course, there are loads of other people my sister went to college with who had nothing to do with Doctor Who, so it's only one that sees the patterns. But nonetheless, she could have gone to college with nobody who had anything to do with Doctor Who at all, let alone be its showrunner. But anyway, she said, she watched Eccleston, watched all of Tennant, watched a bit of Matt Smith, but she said she got a bit bored when it became the Amy Pond show, and where stories were really complicated and had long arcs that were then resolved with lots of lines that she didn't understand. Watched a bit of Capaldi, but then came back in to watch when David Tennant returned. But she mentioned Neil Patrick Harris, so maybe she watched the third of this. Yeah, so she watched The Giggle. She definitely didn't watch on Christmas Day because I was there with the family and had to sneak off. But now wasn't into it. So that's that, and that to me, it seems to me to be the sort of a lot of my sort of friends and family and casual people who watched Doctor Who and were certainly more into it than I would ever have dreamed they would have been when the show came back. But that seems to be my sister's story. Seems to me to be the typical path taken, and I wonder what historians will make of that. And I'm sure you'll all now bombard me with different stories and different people with different attitudes. That wasn't a scientific survey. It was when my sister said it to me. It just seemed to me to be familiar to other stories told. I say that simply because I'm here and my sister's here, and it's a bit of perspective that is what the post-credits real end, only for the most long-suffering listeners who tune in for a bit of post-credits, whatever this is, have got. And that's what you got this time, and we liked it.